These celebrations are about closure. They're about examining history, acknowledging the oppression, but at the same time suggesting that we've gone beyond that historical moment. There was racism, there was repression, there was the Ku Klux Klan, but we managed to transcend all of that. After all, the President of the United States for the last 6 years is a black man. Well, we know better than that. Right. But I was thinking that it's interesting because some very important victories have been won. When I grew up in the South, it was not possible for the majority of black people to vote. My mother and father could not vote, even though they were teachers. We've managed to win some victories, and important victories. But that isn't to say that we've won all of the struggles. And what's interesting, if one looks at Bobby was talking about the 10-point program of the Black Panther Party. What's interesting about that program, it seems to me, is that every single point is still relevant.
Thank you. Yes.
Every single point. And I think that is what we have to say. It may not be the case that a new Black Panther Party emerges, but certainly those questions that were placed on the historical agenda by the Black Panther Party have to be continually addressed. And I think, but Bobby said he wasn't a socialist. Well, I am. I think some of those points actually are about challenging the capitalist organization of our lives, housing, healthcare, etc. Okay. I understand that you had another workshop called Unblurring the Lines, Combating Rape Culture and Gender-Based Violence. And it is so important to recognize the extent to which, all of our struggles are gendered.
Right.
And that, I want to talk a little bit, let me set my, I forgot to start my time. Hold on for a second, because I don't want to speak too long. But I do want to talk later on about the connection between the institutional violence, police violence, prison violence, and intimate violence. The connections between what happens at the level of institutions and at the level of the state violence, and what happens within private, intimate relationships. And so it means that rape culture, the cultures we inhabit are rape cultures. Rape is not a small issue. It is not a single issue to be dealt with over here somewhere, by a few women. But it's something that has to be taken up by everyone who believes in democracy. There was another workshop on the BDS and the Palestinian struggle for self-determination. And it seems to me that just as during the 1950s and especially the 1960s, that the black struggle in the U.S. was a struggle acknowledged by people all over the world. Yeah. And in the 1980s especially, the eyes of the world were focused on South Africa. We were struggling to end apartheid. It seems to me that at the beginning of the 20th century, the eyes of the world should be focused on Palestine. And then I understand there was a workshop, People Before Profit, the movement for fossil fuel divestment. So we talk about the environment. No struggle can be successful if we cannot manage to guarantee that there will be a habitable environment in the future. And then finally there was one called Rise Up Anti-Racism Organizing. And of course I think now we know the extent to which racism, especially under conditions of global capitalism, has invaded the planet. And so this is a time, it seems to me, for us to reflect on how we can globalize struggles against racism. You know, what are the connections between the campaigns against racism that are happening here in Canada and in the US and in Australia? And what about the anti-immigrant campaigns that have developed in this part of the world, the connection between that anti-immigrant sentiment and state violence against immigrants and what is going on in Europe? Even in South Africa. And I want to talk a little bit about South Africa because South Africa was really our hope. And there are wonderful things happening in South Africa now, but there are also some very difficult moments, particularly with respect to what has happened to the prison system in South Africa, the use of incarceration to address issues that we thought were going to be addressed by a redistribution of economic resources in South Africa, but of course under the pressures of global capitalism and the juggernaut of privatization, that has not happened. And therefore, the surplus population that is produced by economies that are so focused on profit, that population ends up being an incarcerated population. Making money for mega corporations that produce and run private prisons all over the world. We want to talk a little bit about those connections.